Every serious incident on the road requires forensic examination.
You've got to start asking the question, why has this happened?
Pedestrians been struck in the cone-off area of this dual carriageway. The car has failed to stop.
And inside the cordons, dedicated officers take on this challenge.
Clearly, I don't think this came out of the factory sounding like that. This person's lost their life for whatever reason. We're here trying to establish why. And only now can I realise that that is actually in the middle of my lane.
Tracking down the evidence.
This is really important, this is key.
To get to the truth.
Once we've got somebody, that's going to put him in the driver's seat.
There's a death on the road, so we've got to be investigated properly and thoroughly. This is a proper head scratcher, this is.
All in a day's work for the crash detectives.
Tango Echo 5-1 off at scene. We've got severe head trauma. Injuries are believed to be life-threatening. Paramedics requested, air ambulance attend. It's a motor vehicle and it's looks like it's been in collision with an electric scooter.
The rider of the e-scooter is a 26-year-old man who is now fighting for his life.
So you're the driver of that Corsa, yeah? You're the passenger?
Two people were travelling in the blue Vauxhall Corsa.
Can I sit in my car a second? Alright, take a seat in there.
The 18-year-old driver now needs to explain.
You don't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you fail to mention when questioned something that you may later rely on in court, and anything that you do say may be given in evidence.
The time is 2:31, off at a Sirius on 4042, Newport northbound. We've got some torches. Let's go. As we've got there, the scooter rider was still being treated by the ambulance and the paramedic staff.
I gather you've had information on what's happened.
Yeah, we've had a bit. Yeah, we've had a bit. That particular scene was very busy. There was lots of people. Is there a Saab somewhere?
SIO's up there.
There was lots of vehicles still within the scene. We still had evidential marks on the carriageway. See, this is a problem now. The thing is, we've got an active scene, we've got people walking through it. We had to be very careful of controlling where people were standing, where they were walking. Can we just make sure that nothing else moves now? Right, perfect. Yeah. Nice one. All right, thanks, Paul. So this is a point where we need to start being considerate of like scrape bins, and it's not to necessarily say there are any.
Yeah,
but there's always the potential. Those types of marks for us are the really essential bits of information that can help us piece together exactly what's happened. Hey, Sarge, right?
Everything right? I've never seen anyone's socks come off. Maybe shoes.
Okay, so we've got socks, a bit of blood on. Got the back wheel of the scooter. Yeah, certainly looks okay. So that was the primary thing for us to concentrate on when we got there, is just having that step back and trying to take all of it in. Now let's take a bit of trim or something, like a grill or something maybe.
Yeah.
Until we work out, oh, it's a Corsa he's hitting there, horse that's hitting. And then identify, well, what can I see? What have I got in front of me? And what am I expecting to see based on the circumstances of the collision? damage to the vehicle sort of started at the front near side corner, around the bumper area, and it basically just extended across the bonnet, into the windscreen, into the roof line, and even across the top of the roof. Wow. But you could see, with the amount of damage caused to the vehicle, just how much intrusion into that passenger cabin there would have been. That really kind of pointed towards how the collision had occurred between the scooter rider and the car.
You've got marks there then. She's seeing that.
We started to identify those bits of evidence that were important. We saw bits of vehicle trim. We also found sort of the rear plastics of the scooter. And we actually started to find fragments of the structure of the rear wheel that had been scattered across the road surface. We found a sock that was in the carriageway. We saw bits of jewellery. We were then able to identify a shoe that was in the central reservation. And a second shoe, which was actually the other side of the opposite carriageway, which was the matching shoe. It just went to show how things had just been thrown to such a distance and such a degree because of the forces involved.
Let me just walk out of earshot a minute. So there's still some members of the public about. I'm not sure whether they passed it over the channel, but they stopped treating him.
Do we know who he is yet?
Not yet, but as soon as we can get any sort of ID to him, we obviously need to get a message to his family without somebody else getting to them first.
Can't get an ID on him yet. I'm searching for no ID on him.
I was aware that my colleagues were struggling with identifying the rider of the scooter.
There's a McDonald's hat about 50 metres off the roundabout. Yeah.
There was a cap that was actually in the carriageway. It was a good 400 or 500 metres prior to the actual collision scene. Some of my colleagues were off doing inquiries with some of the local McDonald's restaurants, and we were able to subsequently identify him as part of those inquiries.
With efforts underway to track down his family, officers now needed to know just how he was struck as he travelled along this stretch of road.
When we got to the collision scene, the scooter itself was actually wedged underneath the front near side corner of the car. It had remained in situ, nobody had moved it, and I don't think that anyone would have been able to move it because it was jammed pretty tight underneath the car. There was two distinctive areas of damage that were identifiable on the scooter, one of which was the end of one of the handlebars, and another was the edge of the footplate. And when you looked at the damage to the scooter, you could then look at, well, if that damage has been caused in that way, there must be a mechanism for that damage to be caused. So we then went back through the scene very slowly and were able to identify a bit of a dark transfer mark from the damage to the end of the handlebar, but also some sort of metal grindings which had been caused by the edge of the scooter as the car had basically sat on top of it and ground it into the road surface as it came to rest. Both of those marks were really helpful in identifying the path of both the scooter and the car post-collision. So realistically, if they're going at national speed limit speeds, our point of impact's probably behind Justin's car, I would have thought. Or possibly anyway. One of the first things that we look to identify is the point of impact. But this particular collision, the point of impact wasn't immediately obvious. The fact that there was an e-scooter on a restricted dual carriageway was quite a strange circumstance to be in. So my thoughts were, well, if there is an e-scooter on that particular stretch, I was assuming it would be as close to the side of the carriageway as possible. But we then started considering some of the other marks that had been left by the vehicles. That's kind of a distinctive.
When we first saw it, it was quite a distinctive S-shaped mark.
That looks fresh.
It was quite light in colour and didn't really match what we thought had happened initially.
But would he be in the middle of that? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's an ask, isn't it, to be in, you know, we're questioning the sense in riding up here in the dark, but you wouldn't be in the middle of the lane, would you? It just doesn't seem to make sense, does it? No. Why would he be
there?
But when we were able to piece it together with all of the other evidence, it became obvious that that mark had actually been where that scooter rider had been at the point that he was struck. It identified that the scooter rider had been travelling almost up the centre of lane 1 of a 70-mile-an-hour dual carriageway.
At the scene of the crash, the rider's scooter remained trapped underneath the car. But now it's been recovered, and Matt wants to take a closer look.
The main bit of damage is obviously the section at the rear. This would have been the very first bit that got struck by the car. But then you can also see that there's a lot of damage and kind of force that has been applied to this brake disc, causing it to be warped out of position. And you've also got, this is the remnants of the wheel itself that's been sort of broken into pieces, and that's also been compressed and has effectively fractured because it's been put under so much force. We'd found parts of the rear wheel sort of scattered across the carriageway, but I wanted to satisfy myself that the marks that I'd found were as a result of the initial collision. It's obviously going to be impossible to tell whether that light was working because the actual light itself is missing.
Yeah.
But the cabling is present, so it would appear to be, or it's conceivable that it was working. Obviously we're never going to know that, but... Remember that S shape and we were like, that doesn't look right to me. There it is. That is where the car has collected the scooter and basically just pushed the whole scooter down into the ground. And then that S shape is going to be a combination of the car's motion and the scooter being kind of just like...
Yeah, because it's ended up under...
Yeah, exactly. Now we found that.
Yeah.
I'm 100% happy that that is what's caused that mark, definitely. I'll just try and power it now. We were still able to power it up, and when we did that, one of the very first things that came up on the display was the fact that it was in sport mode. So he's up the top limit at 19 miles an hour.
This little light here.
That setting alone would suggest that it was very much feasible that the scooter rider could have been travelling at 19 miles an hour on the dual carriageway.
But speed is only part of this inquiry.
This is an identical version of the scooter that was involved in the collision that we've actually purchased to do some testing. It's really important for us to try and understand not only the collision itself, but the lead up and how this scooter would have worked for the person that was riding it at the time. I think they can be quite an appealing mode of transport. They're battery operated. You know, you can plug them in. They're charged in a couple of hours, and they don't take any effort. You can effectively press go, and as long as you can balance on it, you can use it. Braking is very simple, so very much like a bicycle brake.
But there are strict rules around exactly where these scooters can be used.
Some of the big cities are still running trials in relation to e-scooters, but in anywhere else but those trials, these scooters can only be used legally on private land with the landowner's consent. Another stone then. That's obviously got solid tyres as opposed to pneumatic tyres. So how does that feel to ride?
It accelerates quite fast. It seems any little deviation you really feel. My back wheel went over a stone earlier and the back end was off the surface for half a second, and it felt as if I was going a bit faster, I think the back end would have gone. When you go to turn, I don't think I'd want to turn sharply. I'm going to pull the brake now when I get to the end. It'll kick in quite fast, but emergency brake on this, I think my foot would have to go on the floor. I wouldn't feel comfortable riding when on a road. I think if a car put me under pressure, come too close to me or something like that, and I swerved, I think it would be very easy to lose. Yeah. To lose it.
Lose control of, yeah.
So if they haven't been hired within official trial areas, the law around privately owned scooters is clear.
Those scooters are illegal to use on the roads. They're illegal to use on pavements. They're illegal to use anywhere that the public have access. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand that and don't realise that. But not only are they illegal, they make for very vulnerable road users.
Can we have that?
Yeah, it's that. Test scooter, line it up. It'll be a good representation of, you know, what it would have looked like as the car is at the scooter. One of the first things we'll often do is we will try and put the vehicles back together to try and work out their orientations just at that point of impact. It explains an awful lot as to how that damage has been caused, doesn't it? So I think what we'll do, if we move it out.
Yeah.
If you stand on that. Oh mate, that's awesome. So if you were like, as if you were riding.
So it'd be more like.
Yeah, that's better. So what we've done here is Bonnie's just helping just to kind of recreate the position of the scooter rider. It gives just an idea about where the knees would roughly be in relation to the front of the car, and then obviously as the car has struck the rider and the scooter, just exactly where the body would be thrown backwards onto the car and effectively up the bonnet and into the windscreen. You can see the damage is not just the front edge of the roof as well, it's actually creased right the length of the skin.
Shows it, doesn't it?
Like that from the side. That's what it would look like at the point of impact. We don't have any direction changes from the point at which the damage starts. And everything that we can see so far would suggest that the vehicles, we only use the term vehicles for the scooter as well, were in line as they've struck. That would kind of suggest that the vehicle isn't swerving at the point at which it's collided. All the evidence that we could find when we did the refit suggested that the car had just driven into the e-scooter. The driver had taken no avoiding action. So that was definitely an element to try and work out, well, why was that the case? Right, lights then. So Fred, headlights working because they're on. The fundamental inquiry for us was all about view and vision. Full beam? Yeah, they're fine. Fogs on the front. I'd actually driven that stretch myself in my personal car, and I'd even driven that thinking at night, there seems to be plenty of visibility. I couldn't understand why the driver of that car hadn't had tens of seconds of view, even travelling at 70 miles an hour. And based on that, the decision was made to try and reconstruct the collision.
Right, we're just starting to close off the designated shelter lane now.
Okay, mate.
So they're putting a full closure on.
Full closure both sides.
The team are now back at the scene of the crash at the same time of night.
We've organised for the road to be closed, and then we've also then sourced a similar vehicle to the subject vehicle that was involved. At the point of impact, I think the car has literally just gone straight on top of the scooter, pushed the scooter down into the ground, and has basically stayed on top of the scooter, grinding it into the carriageway, basically. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Although it's quite small, it's quite bright. It may be different a bit further back, but that's the whole idea of bringing it tonight. We've also then taken the clothing that he was wearing at the time, which allows us then to sort of visually reproduce what the rider looked like from the rear. We've tried to replicate the conditions as closely as possible to investigate exactly what the scooter looked like as it was travelling down the road. So working on the idea that the car could have been travelling at 70 miles an hour, and the fact that the scooter rider could have been travelling at 15 or 19 miles an hour, we then set out a series of cones at the positions those vehicles would have been at 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 seconds prior to impact. Ready?
Yeah. So start.
Jump on, Squire. So if you go back to 5.
Yeah, okay, and work forward.
And we'll work forwards. See, with nothing else, no other light pollution. That's clear as day, isn't it? The big difference would be when we put that here, full beam headlights on. You're at red 3, mate,
Yes, I'm red 3 now.
Red 2 then, Chris, please. final piece of this inquiry will be us videoing the approach to the point of impact. Right, you ready?
Okay.
Start that. Okay, so we're at full beam. So we're just going to head towards the point of impact now at around sort of 10 miles an hour, just to give a visual representation. And all I can see at the moment is that small red light. It's any different to the road surface. Still can't see anything. I can just about now see the design on the back of his jacket, and only now can I realise that that is actually in the middle of my lane. And only now has he sort of come into really crisp view. Wow. I knew what I was looking for. And it was not until fractions of a second prior to that point of impact that I was able to identify him for what he was. Thank you, mate. I think that's us now, but...
This footage was captured at a speed of just 10 miles an hour. But on the night of the crash, the driver said they'd been travelling at 70 miles an hour, when all of a sudden, they hit something.
It's not until we did the reconstruction that we appreciated, because it was a very gentle left-hand bend. The small red light on the back of the scooter almost blended into the red cat's eyes on the edge of carriageway. It was not until you got very close that that red light actually stood away from those cat's eyes. The design on the back of his jacket was a circular design, and it was quite distinctive, but unfortunately there was a circular sign on the edge of the carriageway, and that just served to blend him into the overall environment of the collision scene, which again made it even more difficult for the driver of the car to identify him as a hazard. Under no circumstances would you expect to see an e-scooter in the middle of lane 1 of a dual carriageway in the dark.
No charges were brought against the 18-year-old driver.
I can imagine it was a very traumatic experience, and probably still continues to be so.
Investigations revealed that the 26-year-old e-scooter rider was almost 2.5 times the drink-drive limit.
Intoxication maybe answered a lot of questions as to why he ended up being in the position and the circumstances that he found himself in. As sad as it is, it was that scooter rider's decision which ultimately resulted in his death.